Okay, welcome to our free talk this evening here at the Film Society of Lincoln Center. Special thanks to our sponsor of these free talks, HBO. This film, Tony Robbins, I'm Not Your Guru, opens this week in theaters. Welcome to those who are listening in on our podcast or watching us on YouTube. To get the evening started, please join me in welcoming the director of Tony Robbins, I Am Not Your Guru, Mr. Joe Berlinger.
Free talk? I thought I was getting paid. No, just kidding. Just kidding. I'm not getting paid. That was a joke. And I have my own water.
Tony Robbins will be with us momentarily. Before we bring him out, we wanted a chance to talk with Joe a little bit about the making of the film. And before he gets here, you can tell us all the things that you wouldn't want to say when he's in the room. I'm kidding. But I was just thinking, Joe has a long association with the Film Society. We've shown many of his films here at the Film Society, and I think at this point it wouldn't really be appropriate to open a Joe Berlinger film if you and I didn't sit down for some sort of conversation or interview or something like that.
It would not be a premiere if it wasn't a talk with you.
So thank you for joining us today and spending this time with us. I thought it would be interesting, and before Tony joins us, to talk about how you make a movie, how you make a documentary about a figure like this. But I think before we talk about that, I was just thinking as I was watching this trailer, I've seen all of Joe's films, and I wonder, what do you look for in a documentary subject, and how has that changed over the course of your career? Some people may know Joe from his early work, Brother's Keeper. Certainly, I mean, the Paradise Lost trilogy certainly brought a lot of attention to you. And but I wonder if what you look for in a subject has evolved over 20-some years, 25 years.
Well, I mean, yes and no. On the things that always interest me are the stories that, through the telling of an individual story, there's some universal theme. I don't think I'm much different from many filmmakers. I'm always looking for kind of giving a voice to people who don't normally get to be in the movies. That obviously with Tony, that's an exception. I look for stories in which you can explode stereotypes, starting as early as Brother's Keeper. Who would have thought that you could feel the kind of emotional, positive feelings that you start to feel for these dairy farming brothers? They all slept in the same bed together. They don't change their clothes. I remember when Bruce and I shot Brother's Keeper, the house stunk, and we would drive home and there still would be flies in our vehicle. But we came to love that smell because it was a metaphor for us entering into this world, and we wanted to take that audience on that same journey where you go from either kind of making fun of the guys or even repulsion to, by the end of the movie, you've accepted them as three-dimensional human beings. You've exploded the stereotype of, if you drive down that one-way country, if you had gotten lost off the highway and had driven down that road with the burnt-out refrigerators and stoves and strewn about in the high grass, and you come to this dilapidated shack, and you have these images of Deliverance North. Most people would put the car in reverse and get out and be afraid. And instead we stayed and we got to know these people, came to really love them as human beings. And that's kind of the journey that we take the audience on. Paradise Lost is also about exploding stereotypes. The whole premise that these teenagers could be, Satanists because they listen to Metallica music and dress in black and read Stephen King novels. That whole idea was so ludicrous that those things were actually entered into evidence. So I'm looking always to kind of explode stereotypes, right up to Tony Robbins, because I think a lot of people have a misperception of who he is. I think a lot of people have a lot of baggage associated with self-help, and I hope people come into the movie kind of the way I came into the situation. I met Tony at a party in 2012, and we just kind of hit it off. He was a fan of the Metallica film, which is also a huge film about exploding stereotypes, by the way. Most rock and roll films kind of put rock stars on a pedestal, and this kind of brought them off the pedestal in a very human way and humanized them. But I met Tony and we struck up a conversation about the Metallica movie. And because that movie is about therapy, and I apologize if you haven't seen these movies and don't know what I'm talking about, but
you should see them if you haven't. You should.
But he was he loved the Metallica movie because at the end of the day, that movie is about the vicissitudes of fame and fortune and not being chained by the image. And these guys no longer wanted to live by the ethos of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and wanted to get on with their lives but still make music. And they were not getting along, and so they hired a therapist. So the film is ultimately about therapy and human relationships and those kinds of issues. So we struck up a nice conversation. And I had no idea that Tony actually did live seminars. I thought he was just like that self-help infomercial DVD guy who made an appearance on Shallow Hal, in the elevator scene. But he was very charismatic, incredibly charming. I think he sensed that I might have had some issues going on in my life, when I met him in 2012, which I did, which we can get into in a minute or not. And he just invited me out to this 6-day seminar. And, I am a huge, if you know from my credits, I've actually done quite a bit of work in the last 25 years, so I'm a bit of a workaholic. So for me to take 6 days out of my life to do anything, let alone to go to a seminar, which I had never done, to look into issues about myself, is just something I couldn't believe I was actually doing, but something compelled me to go. I showed up in Palm Springs, California. The seminar starts. There's lots of music and dancing and pairing off with strangers and to reveal like your innermost feelings. And it just everything about it was sending the wrong message to me. So I fled on the first break out to the exit doors, and I called my wife and I said, "Oh my God, this is so not for me. What do I do?" And she said, "Give it another day." So I gave it another. You've taken 6 days. So I gave it another day, and on day 2, there was an amazingly transformational experience. You'll see it in the film, he takes you through this guided memory exercise in which he challenges you to go back to your earliest childhood memory, and then challenges you to remember something about that memory that you might have repressed or forgotten. And I mean, it's a little more complicated than this, but in a nutshell, if you remember the memory before your earliest memory, it releases you from often the thing that holds you back from achieving what you want to achieve in life. And so I did that, and I was in a room of 2,500 other people who did it with their eyes closed. I opened my eyes. I was flooded in tears, and I'm a tough, cynical New Yorker, as you know. And for me to be flooded in tears at a seminar was quite unusual for me. And I thought, wow, it wasn't like light bulbs went off and the skies parted and all of a sudden my life was perfect, but I felt lighter. And I felt like, wow, if something can make me feel this way, I'm going to give it a shot. So thankfully my wife, Lauren, who's here, where's Lauren? Say hello, Lauren. She encouraged me to stay because on day 2, it was, it opened my eyes that, maybe I should stay. I stuck it out for the 6 days, ended up having an incredibly positive experience, and I reached out to Tony and I said, look, thank you for inviting me. Not only was it awesome, and I told him the whole story. I hated it the first day, and then I just made this switch. And I said, I'd love to make a film about you. He was initially reluctant. I chased him for about 2 years to agree to make to the film. We can get into why he was reluctant first. But the point is, even with Tony, and going back to your question, I'm sorry for the long answer here, but even for Tony, to me, this film is about exploding the stereotype of what self-help means and what these seminars are and what people misperceive about him. And I take, hopefully, look, I think, and it's too bad people haven't actually seen the film so they would know more about what I'm talking about, but, I think 20% of the audience, they're going to hate it. They're going to think it's groupthink. They're going to it's going to confirm everything negative, that they think about this type of activity. As Taylor Swift says, the haters are going to hate. And, there's nothing I can do about those guys. And about 20% of the audience, I think are Tony Robbins fans, and I could put up Black and just put his voice up and they'll think it's the greatest film they've ever seen.
How many people here are fans of Tony, know his work, have been to one of his events,
Okay,
or
so-
read his books, things like
All
that?
right, so,
Okay.
so those
Everybody who's sitting close, by the way.
All right, so those people will love the film. It's the people in the middle, like me, and it's the journey. It's the who have no perception or a misperception, who may be suspicious about this type of activity. Those are the people who I want to take on the same journey that I took, which is a journey of, I would almost say, repulsion to not just acceptance, but just having this incredible experience and being given some tools to manage, my sense of self-fulfillment.
Well, let's give people a taste of the film. And in just a moment, Frank, up in the booth, we're going to play that first clip. But just to set it up, as Joe mentioned, the film is really primarily sealed within this experience of this 6-day program. And I just forgot the title, I'm sorry, of the program. Date with Destiny. So it's a program that Tony does multiple times a year.
Well, he does it once in the U.S. and once in Australia.
Got it. Okay. So Joe and his crew have been invited into this experience for 6 days to bring their own cameras and capture it through their own eyes. So just to give you a taste or a visual for sort of what they're doing, why don't we play the first clip, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the movie and about documentary filmmaking.
So that's the first 2 hours that made me run out the door.
That was it.
It gets much more interesting.
So
I warn you,
what makes a good documentary, Joe?
Oh boy, different people do documentaries
For you, what
for
makes a
different
good
reasons.
documentary?
Okay, I want to take people into a world that they don't necessarily know, don't necessarily think they even want to go into, and take them on a journey and deposit them on the other side. And in some way, I hope that the audience has changed in some way. They've had some insight, some epiphany about their own life, or about the need to help somebody else. It's got to. I mean, right from the earliest days, from Brothers Keeper, which now seems very commonplace, but I think Brothers Keeper was an early, and we weren't the only ones, but I think we were an early example of wanting to imbue into a nonfiction film all the fine qualities of fiction filmmaking. That doesn't mean being untruthful, of course. You have an added responsibility of being truthful in a documentary, but the good qualities of fiction, meaning, dramatic, some kind of dramatic structure and a dramatic arc, and amazing characters, and just something that allows people to see into a world that you don't normally get to see.
When you're making a documentary, when you are making a documentary, what are the parameters? What are the ground rules? Are there ground rules that you establish with a subject? Are they consistent from film to film? Are they different depending on the film? Or did you have ground rules with Metallica? Did you have certain ground rules with Damien Eccles? Did you have ground rules with Tony? How do you set up the parameters?
That's a good question. I mean, it depends. Certain films, I've made some tough films about some tough subjects. Pollution in the Amazon with crude. Certainly, I didn't have any parameters with Chevron. I just had to, tell the story.
They would have preferred you not tell the story at all.
Probably. Eccles was on death row. There was no, he knew. I mean, I don't think he understood at the time that we were really what our role was. But I need access, and we need control of the film. So the only, actually it took me 2 years to get Tony for me to convince Tony to do the film, which is why for the most part, the audience reaction to this film has been fabulous. We've had standing ovations, people in tears, people who came in thinking, I was going to hate this, but it just made me really think about my life. And, but some of the more intellectual-minded, not that I'm not an intellectual, maybe that's not the right word, but there's been some criticism directed towards the film by some critics, like it's a promotional film, which to me just boggles my mind, because I spent 2 years chasing him, and I think the film is incredibly objective. You can think what you want about this event. I've done a really good job of taking a 72-hour event and condensing it down to 2 hours and really giving you the feeling what it's like to be at that event.
So give us a
it took me 2 years to chase. I mean, it's not so much parameters. It's like it's the fighting for the winning of access. I think all the films I did with Bruce Sinofsky and the films I've done myself. We've taken you to places you don't normally get to see.
So how do you make that case with a subject that's resistant? Because a lot of people might be resistant to having a camera follow them around, throughout an experience.
For this particular film, Tony was concerned about several things. One, he was concerned that the presence of the documentary camera would impede in the attendees' experience, and people are revealing of themselves in pretty emotional ways. Now, he has cameras there. So cameras weren't totally new, but he has cameras there because it's a big room with 2,500 people, and just like in a rock concert, there are jumbotrons on the screen so that if Tony is in any corner of the room, no matter where you're sitting, you can look up and see the action. But those kind of cameras kind of hang back. They're, it's a different thing than a documentarian being in your face. So he was very concerned about that. Impeding the attendees' experience. His other big concern was, it's a 72-hour content-rich event, and so how do I reduce that to 2 hours and be faithful to the reality of it? He was concerned that, like the interventions in the film that you see where these people give up, stand up and, really go through all of their emotional kind of stuff. Do we have a clip of something like that? Okay, good.
We're going to see that.
Sometimes those take place, over a 2-hour period, and I had to condense them down to, 7-8 minutes, which for a documentary is a long scene, but for reality, it's, he was concerned that somehow the condensation of time would trivialize or misrepresent what he does. And so he had not actually seen my other films, so I sent him my other films, and I convinced him that all documentary making is about the condensation of time, that there's no such thing as objective reality in any documentary. A documentary is a bunch of subjective decisions, and you are always condensing time. The good documentary maker condenses time in such a way that you capture the emotional truthfulness of the event or the subject that you're covering, not necessarily the the objective. I wouldn't even qualify it. You're not capturing, the objective reality of Tony's seminar is watching the seminar for 72 hours. Anything less is not you want to capture the emotional truthfulness. So that was a big issue for him, because he didn't want his process or the presentation of what he does with people to feel trivialized. So I convinced him that it's the emotional truthfulness that matters in this form, in the documentary form. For example, I sent him Paradise Lost, and the original Paradise Lost is a 2.5-hour film, the first one, of which about 60 minutes is the actual murder trial. The actual murder trial in real life was 6 weeks long. It's only about 60 minutes of the film, and yet nobody questioned the veracity of the film, the emotional truthfulness of the film. Damien was on the stand for a week. He's on the stand in the film for 10 minutes. I mean, that's the nature of documentary. So after I showed him a few films and talked about it, he got it, and so then we were just left with the concern about impeding. And I said, look, I'll come at my own risk. If at any point, I need control of the movie creatively, and I don't want to be told I can't go there or can't go there. But if you want to wholesale pull the plug, if you feel I'm getting in the way, whether it's the first hour or the last hour of Date with Destiny, if you feel like I'm getting in the way and ruining it for your attendees, then throw me out, and I'll give you the footage, and that's that. And so with that promise and arrangement, so that was our arrangement. That was my access deal with him.
That's an intense offer to make.
He could cancel at any time.
That's a bold offer to make from a filmmaker's perspective, to be able to put everything on the line so that your subject could actually pull the plug on you.
Yeah, in this, and maybe I wouldn't have done it in other kinds of situations, but pull the plug. Once I hauled the material, just to be clear, once I hauled the material back to New York, and he was cool with how I covered the event, then there's no going back.
Yeah.
But it was like he just cared about, is this going to affect the quality of the people who have paid money to be there. And I was okay with that because this is, this is the shortest story I've ever covered in a film. It's only a 6-day shoot, so it was
feels like a breeze for you.
I know.
You spend decades on stories.
Exactly. And also selfishly, what drove me to go back is I attended this thing in 2012. I found it to be incredibly compelling and transformative for me, and I wanted to see, selfishly, if I went back a second time, this time with a journalist's eye, with a camera in hand and an all-access pass, would I, sometimes peeking inside the sausage factory, the old cliche is you don't want to know what's goes into the sausage. And so, I wanted to see and was concerned, would I be disenchanted by, being able to see how it's put together. So I had my own kind of, plus it'd be a I figured the worst thing that could happen is I'd get another free 6-day seminar and I could test some of my thoughts, and, but luckily luckily he didn't cancel on me. So
we're going to take a look at a second clip just to give you again a better sense of the movie. And as I mentioned, it opens in theaters this week. Frank, let's take a look at that second clip from the film. Tony Robbins' I Am Not Your Guru opens in theaters this week, as I mentioned, and I'm saying that out loud for those who will be listening to this podcast. I'm also saying that.
Also launching on Netflix, we can't forget about that.
Please.
July 15th debuts in, I think it's 190 countries now, and 81 million subscribers. I mean, that's pretty awesome for somebody like me who's, brother's keeper. We schlepped around to theaters, print by print, and it's the world has changed. To think that your film can have that kind of impact so quickly is pretty cool.
Well, to continue our conversation here at the Film Society, let's bring down the subject of the film, Mr. Tony Robbins. Welcome. Good to see you.
How are you all? Awesome.
We've been talking here at the Film Society about what makes a documentary, what makes a good documentary, how a documentary filmmaker navigates the sometimes challenging landscape of a relationship with a subject, a relationship with time. You were talking about condensing time, the idea of maintaining the emotional truth of a story. Tony, you were resistant initially to the idea of someone.
I wasn't resistant, it wasn't happening.
Oh, so it wasn't even on the table. It was absolutely no.
No. And the reason was, I don't know what you guys have talked about so far, but this is a very intimate environment. I see 200,000 people a year in 15 countries, but and most of my events are 7,000 to 10,000 people, or some big ones are 20,000. But this event is reserved for 2,500 people max. Yeah. They do about 20 pages of homework. I read all of that, believe it or not, so my brain is prepared. And then we use cameras, but they're far back. It's just for image magnification, so you see someone's face and the subtleties in a room that size. The idea of someone being in your face in the middle of you sharing these incredible things, I just was concerned would be disruptive. And then I also was very skeptical, not about Joe, but how do you take 6 days of 12, 14-hour days and convert that into 2 hours and have any integrity in the message? And many of these interventions, I don't know if you saw the trailer, I just saw that little piece with no intervention, but many of these interventions are an hour and a half, 2 hours, and they get reduced, and I did 35 of them, and he's showing one a day for about 7 minutes, and it's like, I thought, how the hell are you going to do that? But that's why he has 7 Emmys and nominations, 2 Emmys, his 2 Peabodys and his 2 Academy Award nominations. This man's unbelievable what he's done. I'm completely blown away by what he created.
Thank you.
As we were saying, we bring him back every time he makes a movie to talk with us about it. And one of the things I was thinking about as I was watching this one, and I honestly became more riveted as it went along because it was eye-opening for me in so many ways. I wonder to what extent part of the concern, the challenge, the hurdle of letting a documentary crew in is that Tony, you're on camera when you're out in front of that 2,500 person audience. We're sealed mostly within that experience of all these people going through this really amazing, intense experience. But we're also backstage.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that if you haven't done this before, that to me seems like, and we see it in the film, when you come off stage, you've just gone through something really intense with people who are going through something really intense in that room.
Yes.
And then to have a camera in your face or to have a microphone in your face, I don't know how many minutes after you've just walked off stage.
Yeah.
That, to me, as I was watching the movie, I was questioning whether that was also one of the challenges of having to be on even when you're off stage.
I'm not, some people, I'm a crazy mofo and I have a lot of intensity and passion. And so a lot of people are like, well, he's on. This is how I am all the time. This is what I'm on. There is no on or off. My life is on. So that really wasn't it for me.
Yeah.
From my bigger concern, actually, additionally, I know he knows, is my wife. I can get him on the phone with my wife because my wife is a very private individual. Ironically, she married me. She lived in a community up in Vancouver, Canada, where there were 42 relatives within 12 miles. She never went anywhere. She had motion sickness. She was born with motion sickness. And then I live in, 3 countries, 6 different places as homes, and I'm on a train, a plane, or a helicopter every 4 days. So for her, she's a very private person, and the world is, I don't see myself as a celebrity, but I'm a public figure. And as a result, people want to know everything, and silly shit, they want to know what you had for breakfast. They want to know what size your shoe is, and it's like, it's the weirdest shit people want to know, and my wife feels invaded by that stuff.
Oh, really?
So that was another issue. Actually, she was actually in tears that day saying, we're so maxed, because I just spent 4 years interviewing 50 of the most brilliant financial people in the world. I wrote a financial book, and then we fed 100 million people last year. There was so much going on that to add this to the list, and I just said, this man, honey, is sincere, he's raw, he's real, he's the best in the world at what he does. He's approaching me again. I don't want to say no one more time. I think this is the right timing to do this. Will you please support me in doing this?
And it was literally, it wasn't, because we would talk every couple of months, and it took about 2 years. But when you said yes, it was only about 6 weeks before this thing started.
True.
So
that's
it was
true.
Actually, it was kind of a last minute decision.
It was. Yeah, it really was.
One of the other things that I was thinking about as I was watching this movie is actually, from my point of view as a viewer, how much part of what you do is very similar in that you're each opening up or inviting people to open up to you. You're doing it, as you mentioned, Joe, over months, years, decades sometimes, if you look at like Paradise Lost. Tony, you're doing it in a very intense way.
Compressed, yeah.
In a moment, someone is standing up and sharing with you, but you're functioning in very similar ways in the way that you're navigating that relationship between a subject and someone who's trying to sort of be opened up, invited into their world. And I
got to tell you something. You're very astute. You're the first person that Joe and I have talked about this before. It's like, we're very different people, and yet we come from the same place, right?
Yep.
We have different mediums.
Yep.
We clearly have the same height. We share the same level of optimism. We pursue the same passions. But what we truly do have in common is Joe my attraction to him is he's a seeker for the truth. He's not a seeker. He looks for the truth. He uncovers it. He finds it. He saves lives. He shifts things. And that's what I do as well. We're both seekers of the truth that take the truth to the public, because as corny as it sounds, the truth sets you free. I mean, when you know the truth, you can deal with anything. And we live in a world full of bullshit. We live in a world where reality TV is a lie, for God's sakes. It's all a lie. So when people experience something raw and real, it's riveting. And that's what I experienced in him as a man. And that's what I experienced in his documentaries. And then that's what the appeal was. And as we spent time together and became such good friends, it was just because we really have the same mission. We just have gone about it with different mediums.
Interesting, and thank you for saying that. And but you added actually as a filmmaker, now you've added actually a new level of nuance to it, because what you're also saying is that what his gift is getting people to open up to him. Then he has the perception to go in and figure it out. And in the same way, that's what my job is. My job is to get access and to get people to open up.
That comes across in the movie to me. It made me wonder if you could share with the audience something that each of you learned about the other over the course of the making of this film? From the point where you started, you had certain expectations or understandings of each other, to the point where you are today. Share with us something about the other person that we might not know, or that might surprise us, or that you learned.
I think Joe is a softie. He's got this, hardcore New York exterior, pessimistic, skeptical, but he's a softie. He loves people. He cares so much, and I love him to death because he's got a heart as big as this room. And I didn't know that when I met him initially. I knew he was a good human. I knew he was a good man and a good soul. And I could feel his total integrity from the first time I met him. That's why I wanted to invite him to the event. I just wanted to contribute to somebody that I felt was such a good human being. But I had no idea what a softie is underneath all this stuff. You may disagree with that, but I think he really is. And it touches my heart.
That's kind of you. That's really kind of you to say. That's sweet. What I learned is that when you take press photos standing next to this guy, you got to go on tippy toes. But on a much deeper level, I was mentioning before. I don't know if when you arrived, but I was mentioning that my selfish reason for wanting to make the film, besides wanting to share your mission, which I think is incredible. I had such an amazing experience in 2012, really transformative, that I wanted to see if it would happen again, if the same level of incredible interventions that we saw in 2012, that the year I was not filming, great stories, will that happen again? Will the feelings that you and your teachings and the group evoked in me, would I feel that way again? You know, so I was really, interested in that. And now that I was making a film, I was a little nervous that, well, what if I found out the opposite, and having that backstage pass. And what I've learned about Tony by making the film is that, this man is so committed and dedicated to this mission of helping people become the best people they can be in their own way. That's why it's called I'm Not Your Guru. He's not, and some of the haters, we talked about the Taylor Swift, the haters are going to hate, some of the haters, the Tony Robbins, it's just a cult. And I hate that because, a cult leader provides a very specific, prescriptive way to, this is how you live, you follow my rules, this is the cult.
And they try to separate you from your family. I unify people with the family, and I don't tell them what
Tony is the exact opposite. He wants you to be, that's why he's not your guru, because he's not here to tell you how to be, he's here to give you some tools to figure out the best way you can be as a human being and how to be more connected to one another, which is in these divisive times more important than ever. This is in his DNA, his mission. He's a guy with, I hope I'm not embarrassing you, he's got like 18 companies, some of which have nothing to do with this,
most have nothing to do with this shit.
This stuff. He does like $5 billion in sales. He's a guy who can walk into a corporation and do a talk for, a lot of money, and there are a lot easier, this is what I learned in making the film, there's a lot easier way to make money than what so this is not about money. This is 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, and then as you see in the film, after a long day on stage for literally 12, a rock concert is 3 hours. This is 6 times 12 hours. He meets with his staff and tweaks and refines the day. He is he's so committed to this mission, and that's why I wanted to share it.
Tony, you talk about this in the movie being an obsession. It almost comes across like an addiction. The what's driving you through this experience, it seems like you process it in a way that, I guess you use the word obsession in the movie, so I'll focus on that. It comes across very clearly how much you, for lack of a better word, get off on this engagement with people. Maybe that you were hung used to. For those who are listening,
you have a way with words. Are you a poet or what?
For those who are listening on the podcast at home, I won't detail the gesture that Tony made with his right hand.
Those podcast viewers or listeners will be missing out. Come on.
You can imagine.
No,
is that something is that obsession something that you realized at an early age, or is it something that you become even more aware of and sort of know how to sort of channel and direct it over time?
Yeah, no, it doesn't control my life. Addictions tend to cause you to do things that are inconsistent with what you stand for. A passion is something that causes you to feel a unification with what you're made for. And so it's my passion.
Yeah.
It's not my addiction. But I use the word obsession because I will not give up.
Yeah.
That's the obsessive part.
Yeah.
I know there's a way, and I will find the way. And I've trained my nervous system like a great athlete. You know, a great athlete, a great fighter, a great CEO, a great anything is a person who can bring absolute certainty to the situation, because with that absolute certainty, you will find the way. Without it, you will not. And so I remember years ago, there was a gentleman, most of you probably wouldn't remember so many years ago, but there was a gentleman that was traveling and he was trying to find gold. I'm trying to blank on his name right now, but he's a pretty famous guy, and he found $500 million gold in a Spanish galleon, but it took him, if I remember right, I'm going to bastardize this, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure it was 19 years to do this. So if you can imagine 19 years of failing every single year, every single day, having to convince people to give you more money after you've taken money and gotten nothing for it, he's making the whole thing up. There was no absolute knowledge. He just found this certainty inside himself, much like, as corny as it sounds, the Columbus, right? He didn't have a plot. He just felt certain and then navigated with that certainty somewhere. So I have built that certainty inside of me around one thing. If you stand up, it's done. It's a matter of how it's going to show up. It's going to be different. Not everything will be elegant. Not everything will be pretty. I don't give a shit if it's pretty. I give a shit, does it serve you? And I will find the way. And if one thing doesn't work, I'll do another. I'll be crazy. I'll be weird. I'll be bizarre. I'll be gross. I'll be playful. I'll be funny. I'll be kind. Seem like I might be mean, but I'm not. And people see that pretty quickly. But I'll use whatever it takes to produce that change. But it's a meaningful life. I mean, what is life for? If you're living it only for yourself, it's pretty stale pretty quick. There's only so much money, so much love, so much sex, so much drugs, so much rock and roll, so much anything you think is enjoyable. And you can only hold so much. Where life becomes powerful is when you grow, because that's what makes people happy. I always tell people, the one thing, we grow or we die, but if there's one word for happiness, it's progress. Because it's not getting things that make you happy, it's who you become. And if you aren't even where you want to be, but you're making progress on your body, or progress on your relationship, or progress on your business, or progress on your writing, your economics, whatever it is, people feel alive. When people achieve something and then go, is this all there is? That's a pretty ugly place to be. Mm-hmm. So for me, I know my passion, I know what I'm committed to, I've wired myself in that area. But what set me on the journey was the pain. What kept me on the journey was the joy. Right? Pain is what started my journey. I wanted to end the pain for myself, and then when I was good at that, I wanted to end the pain for anyone else, and that's still inside me. I hate to see suffering, and I'll do anything I can to help someone not have to suffer, but I really live for the joy of seeing people reclaim themselves. And I see that in so many different ways in my life. Working with a president or an athlete or a child or in A Date with Destiny or UPW, all the different areas, and it's so rewarding. So it's addictive in that way, it's so rewarding, but it's positive rewards. You can get addicted to something negative or addicted to something positive. But again, I look at it as addiction. My definition of addiction is something that causes you to be something different than you are, something that pulls away from others and pulls away from the core of your spirit or your soul, versus a passion pulls you into it, in my opinion.
Well, we see in the film, we see the pain, we see the light bulb moments, we see those moments of transformation happening in front of us. Let's take a look at one more clip from the movie, and then I want to take some questions from the audience. Cool. So let's do one more clip, Frank.
So that wasn't an do you have an intervention clip?
I think these are the three we had.
Oh, too
Sorry.
bad. And also the
film is really about the interventions.
Yeah, because these are just, this is like, the
filler.
The fill. It's the peanut butter between the crackers,
Well, the interventions are what should.
That's the core of the film, and also for some reason they were missing the the subtitles should be there. So but it's a podcast, so people won't know anyway. So. There were subtitles.
Let's see what folks in the audience want to hear or know, and so that folks on the podcast can hear your question. Let's wait for the microphone. So if you have a question, raise your hand.
I just wanted to know because you mentioned it was an emotional journey for you. Did you and your crew, being in that environment and that energy, like how many times did you cry again and again? Like, did you get emotional where you had to leave the room? I mean, because it seems very intense.
Yeah. Great question. It was very intense, and my crew had varying degrees of reaction at the beginning, and by the end, everyone was locked in and really found it difficult to people were like filming and then realizing they're like, part of the, they had a hard time, like, maintaining, initially.
Spacing out.
And look,
as they were watching and forgetting they were filming.
And I, look, I've worked with the same group of people for a really long time, and we've been to some really dark and terrible places, death row, in Crude, we were on the, in a very contested, border area where the landscape was just decimated through oil pollution. I mean, we've covered some tough stories, and so some of my guys were really skeptical at the beginning. It's like, oh, what's Joe gotten us into this time? And just one by one, they just some took a day, some took two, but they all just felt like they got a huge. In fact, I shot a scene and then decided not to. In trying to figure out what the film was, at first I wanted to include my journey. And then I realized, no, this film needs to be a concert film, like a concert of human emotion, and to not make it about my story. But as part of that, we filmed a scene when I wasn't sure how we were going to actually put it together. I filmed a scene with my crew, which I never do. I turned the camera on the crew, and they all talked about, what they went through. And it's a great, since Netflix doesn't do DVDs, it would have been a great DVD extra. Which I think is funny that Netflix doesn't do DVDs anymore, since that's how it started. But it would have been a great DVD extra to see how my crew reacted at the end. So it was, and for me, it just brought back all the emotion that I had the first time, and it was luckily I'm the boss, so if I want to have an emotional moment, I can step away.
I have to tell you, the crew came to my house after the program was over one night, and we just had a brief little session where we were thanking them, and it was really moving to me that night, because they all described it in such interesting terms. Like, it's like, these people, like, it's like they drank, Jack Daniels, and then they just started opening their souls to each other, and there was no Jack Daniels. How do you do that shit, There were just so many cool different ways of looking at it, but you saw how they were all moved, even though they were working their tails off. And these guys, you can imagine filming, carrying that stuff around for 12-hour days. I mean, they really worked their tail off, but to see them still impacted was really.
I wish it was 12-hour days, because we were the first ones there, last ones to go. Plus, you kept going at the end of the day.
That's true.
They were like 16-hour days.
Yeah, the 16-hour days would be more accurate. True.
Other questions from the audience up here in the second row, and then we'll go to the third row. Hi.
Hey, Tony. Been your student for the last 10 years, so I really appreciate it. Just wanted to thank you for actually, organizing this and giving me and my wife an opportunity to be in such an intimate setting. We actually cut our second-year anniversary short just to come out here.
Oh my gosh.
And see you. Yeah. So we've tried to come out to.
Did she want to do that, or did you want to do that? I just want to see if you're going to stay married. That's all.
But we've tried to come out to one of your events, but because of a couple of setbacks, we just couldn't. But I'm glad we got the opportunity to come here and experience this together. I had a question for you. Is there a certain emotion that took you a considerable amount of effort to overcome over the course of your adult career? I mean, you've helped so many people transform their lives, but individually, as for yourself personally, was there a certain emotion that took you a while to maybe overcome, or? I
think there have been many, honestly. I don't know where I'd start. I just try to give you a real brief. I think one of those is early in my career, I cared so much. I wanted to help everybody. I was so committed. I was so driven. I wouldn't sleep. I guess I still don't do many of those things, but it's not as extreme as it was then. And I also was trying to be perfect, because I thought, as a kid, that's what you needed to be in order for people to listen to you. And, but as I matured as a man, I began to realize there is no perfect. It's all bullshit. And I'd rather just say I don't know if I don't know, and then figure it out, and it changed my approach to things. And that happened early in my 20s, probably. I think I also, in my 30s, I became more of a well-known figure in various countries around the world. And I began to see something I didn't understand, which was, I started out, I was this young kid everybody wrote about. He's helping all these people. All the stories were positive. And I didn't understand something that Madonna clearly understood in her career, which is, if you don't take control and change the story, the media will. Because the old story is boring. I remember I was coaching President Clinton when I was 31, and I was at Camp David with him, and And he was so stressed out because he had been, on top of the world, elected, right? And then all of a sudden, if you remember, the Republicans took over. They had the Contract for America. Some of you are old enough to remember this. And they took over both houses of Congress. And all of a sudden, he was seen as a completely ineffective president. And he was being thrashed in the media in every way. And I remember I sat down with him and I had this long intervention with him. But part of it was I said to him something I learned by that stage by the time I was 32, which is, if you do nothing, the story's going to change. I said, if you do, now I'm not advising you to do nothing, but that you're a weak president, that you can't find your ass with both hands, that you can't resolve anything, that you're not following through. All those things are stories that will get old. And if you do nothing, the media needs another story, so they'll come up with a new one just to keep people interested. I mean, I'm not being derogatory of the media, it's just the nature of the beast. So what I learned after a period of time was, A, I didn't need to be perfect. B, I learned to just trust myself in that area. And then I think C, the media is not designed to educate us, obviously. It's designed to startle you. If they educate you, they'll never get your attention. So they're gonna startle you. Your child may die by drinking water, film at 11. There's always something you're gonna die from, you're gonna get killed from. And they live off of that, and it's nothing wrong. It's just like if you walk by a newspaper stand in the old days, when we also buy newspapers, on the stand, you see a thing that says, great weather this weekend, you keep walking. If it says big storm coming, in those days, you put your 50 cents in. So, the whole frame that if it bleeds, it leads. So the story of who I was turned into a guru, turned into this man who's controlling the minds of congressmen and senators and billionaires. And I hadn't changed an ounce. I hadn't done anything. And so I think I went through a stage of like, oh my God, my mission's gonna die because the media is gonna kill it. And then I just one day just decided to stop living in that fear. And I said, my gifts will make room for me. If I keep serving people, if I keep delivering beyond what anybody else has done, if I keep adding more value than anybody else, then not even some crazy person trying to take you down the media doesn't understand this will be able to do it. And that's been my experience. And I've been doing it 39 years, in 100 countries. At this point, just recently I had a seminar. I do a 4-day seminar called Unleash the Power Within. It has a firewalk in it. It's never been about firewalking. It's an hour of the program. But I used to do skydiving, but it's hard to get 10,000 people flying above Dallas in the middle of the night to do that stuff, right? So we use firewalking, and I've done it for 35 years. I've had 1.5 million people do it. And just a few weeks ago, I was in Dallas. We had 7,500 people there, and always when we do this, about 1% we'll get some hot spots or some blisters. Now, if you're going to come here and you're going to go run the marathon, you're going to probably get some blisters, and it's not going to stop you. It's a badge of courage, and afterwards you go, look what I did, right? That's what it's like for these people. And no one's forced to walk. There's medical professionals on site. But what was different about this one, this happened 5 years ago, by the way, in San Jose, identically. The story went around the world. All these people were burned, and people are calling me, all my friends and people around the world, I'm so sorry this happened, and nothing happened. It was just somebody was driving by, saw this the first time in San Jose, and called and said these people are burning. Same thing happened in Dallas. Somebody unfamiliar with the situation, how we normally operate, said, oh my God, people are burning, sent out all these ambulances. Nobody complained, it was there. I mean, it's like 2 blisters on your feet was like a real severe experience, what's his name, Judd, is it? Apatow said, he sent a little tweet to me and out to everybody else. He goes, sometimes when I walk on fire, it feels like I'm walking on fire. So it's like, yeah, you might get a little blister. But the media story was around the world. And what happens, one person does a story and nobody spends any money anymore. They don't have a team. So all they do is copy the story. And nobody does the investigation. So 5 years ago, Ariana Huffington's a friend of mine. She's been to this event. And so she took one of her staff members and said, I want you to go to the hospital and I want you to do the investigation. Well, no one was hospitalized. They advertised that. It was so bad, Fox News had to turn it around 5 years ago and apologize and retract, which they almost never do. But now it's just happened again. And so would I say to you that I was enthralled by that? No, it pissed me off. I was frustrated, quite frankly, because it's making it sound like it's this, I don't know, like all these people are injured or hurt. It's total bullshit. They said people were hospitalized. Nobody was hospitalized. And so that part's frustrating. But the media has also given me the gift to live in a time when I could get my message around the world because of them. And I'm incredibly grateful. So whatever downside may come at times, it's minute by compared to the upside. So, you go get it corrected. Huffington Post is doing this story. There's one in Inc. magazine. It corrected all the mistakes. Meanwhile, it's gone around the world multiple times, and people are still like, I'm so sorry this happened. What the fuck? Nothing happened. Right? So that part can be frustrating. So I think along the stages, the reason I tell you that is at this stage, though, my reality check is no one's going to, my brand is here to stay. I've done this for 39 years in 100 countries. I have, somebody says things, about this, and there's so many people that have done what I've done that someone will step up and say, I've been there, that's bullshit, it's incredible. And it's the world we live in. The web is an interesting place. It's the Wild West. Most of what's on the web is total bullshit, and you gotta work to find the stuff. And we don't teach people how to evaluate truth. We teach kids just jump on the web and get your answers. And so we have a society that has segmented perceptions. I mean, you look at what's happening right now in this country, and you hear Black Lives Matter, and you hear all this upset, and a lot of white Americans are like, well, that police officer was honest, and many of them have been tried, and they really were honest. But if there are 100 planes go to land and 2 don't land and crash, no one gives a shit about the 98 that landed. Everybody's going to talk about the 2 that didn't. And if you're African American, there have been over the decades so many experiences of injustice that of course there's a sensitivity. I mean, what I see happening in our society is we're not entering other people's worlds. You can live your whole life watching Fox News or MSNBC and have a totally different view of the universe, right, between those two, and we don't really step out anymore. So my mission in what you see in these events is people from every walk of life entering another person's life. You see a woman that's 380 pounds and there's this chachi guy that would normally make fun of her, and now he's sitting here cheering for this woman and really pulling for her, and you can feel every ounce of him cares. How do you create that? That's what I'm fascinated to do. And the microcosm I'm working for is that group of people from 71 countries. But the macrocosm is understanding Black Lives Matter does not mean white lives don't matter. It means there's a group of people who are not being respected. There's a group of people that are angry because they're hurt, and they have to be heard, and we have to do something about it. And the only good news I see about things like this is we're at a threshold. And threshold is what it takes. So there's so much pain that people finally do something to change. You don't have to have pain to change, but most people do. Most people don't change proactively because they're too fearful. But so my view is, how do I help people to integrate those lessons so when they go home, they can have that kind of transformation in their home life, not just within themselves.
And really, at the end of the day, the reason I wanted to make that film is, or this film, the film, is that, in 2012, when I went to this event, I have never quite witnessed anywhere how quickly boundaries between people, dissolve away. Tony creates this environment where people from all walks of life, all socioeconomic strata, different experiences. Some people are there for real trauma that they're working through. Other people are there because they're achievers and they want to get to the next level, and thank God they haven't had that level of trauma. And just very quickly, not only are people there for their own selfish, in quotation marks because it's perfectly fine, their own self-interest, but they're there to cheer other people on, and this feeling of love and connection. And I've never quite seen anything like that. So I wanted to do something a little different with the documentary form, which is to bring that feeling to a film, and I'm not knocking this, and we've talked about documentaries, at the beginning here, and I'm not knocking it because I've made many of these kinds of films, but
the feel bad films?
The feel bad films, exactly. Exactly. Documentary has become synonymous with the takedown piece, with the investigative, this is the latest social ill. And that's important, because with the gutting of print journalism and the corporatization of the media, meaning a handful of corporations own all the television networks, and the blurring of the line between entertainment and reality, certain stories are just not told because for fear of offending advertisers or for fear of offending corporate partners. And so, the independent documentarian has stepped into the void over the last 10 years or so to really do some of the most important social issue reporting of the day. So I'm not knocking it. I've made those kinds of films. Those are important films to make. But I wanted to do something a little different with the form, a little different from what I do, which is to kind of present my take on what I think are his most important universal ideas, and to present them to an audience, not so that you go run out and sign up for his seminar. If that happens, great. I think people will get a lot out of it. But if you spend 2 hours, the running time of the movie, relating to some of these characters, thinking about the direction of your life, thinking about how you can be more fulfilled and content and grateful. That's probably the biggest word that I took out of his seminar, gratitude for what I have, as opposed to expectation. And if you feel more connected to yourself and connected to other people, maybe there would be, now I don't believe this will truly happen because of my film, but if the creative impulse was that if everyone felt a little more satisfied and connected, maybe there would be less social ills for documentarians like me to go run around and make movies about. But don't worry, my next film's on genocide. Which is true, but anyway. But I didn't mean to destroy my speech with my joke. But that's
For those of you who think I've messed up his future, you don't have to worry.
Yes, exactly.
We're almost out of time, but I want to get to two more questions. There's a gentleman here, and then there's a gentleman here. So we'll go to quick question, quick answer, so we can get them in before.
Sure. My name is Oliver. I was actually, Tony, in your Dallas UPW.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I was still wearing it.
Yes. One of the people that burned to death?
That's what I've been saying. They were not in the right state.
Yeah.
I just want to say, Tony, that, the title is I Am Not Your Guru, and you don't tell people what to do or how to live their lives. And I am, in fact, a testament to that, because what you did for me is just unlock that lock I had in my mind with regards to my preconceived notions, which I have gotten probably from family, society, and how I view myself. I would think that because I am a minority, I don't deserve to be in where I find myself.
Yes.
Which is completely incorrect. And I would have all those limiting beliefs that will keep me from taking action and meeting amazing people and being in amazing places and doing amazing things. So, I just want to say thank you for doing that for me.
Oh,
and
that's very kind of you.
He mentions in the seminar that we have certain beliefs that keep us back, and we basically mock those beliefs, and we have to do incantations and believe that we are here for the greatness of ourselves. And Tony, thank you, because for instance, what brought me here today is because I met this completely stranger last Thursday, and I would not usually reach somebody on the train, right? Because we live in New York. You're a creep if you say hello to somebody on the train, right? So this gentleman was reading a book that I'm actually reading, and I said, because I went to the seminar and I understood things differently now, I have a certain sense of certainty. And I said, I'm certain, so let me talk to him. And I said to Jeremy, right here, dude, I'm reading that book. And we just carried on for 25 minutes about how I went to the seminar and the things that we did and everything. And today, I met him 5 days ago, and he tells me, Oliver, there's this Tony Robbins seminar presentation happening, and look how life works. Life is telling me that this is the path, this is the energy. It's bringing me back to that energy that's keeping me happy. So, Tony, thank you.
Well, thank you for the compliment. You did the work, but thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it. You bring something up really happy, really interesting and simple. People ask me a lot recently about, how is it that somebody can go kill men, women, and children like they did in San Bernardino or Paris or Orlando or so many places now, right? You look at the terrorist example. And I said, I can't tell you what makes somebody do that, but I can tell you who didn't do it. It wasn't a happy person. It wasn't a fulfilled person. Happy, fulfilled people don't try to kill strangers. They don't try to hurt friends. They don't try to steal anything. And we, as a culture, have so made our minds the most important thing when our hearts and our spirit and our souls are the most important thing. And as long as the mind's in control, you'll never be happy. Your brain's 2 million years old, and that 2 million year old brain is designed to make you survive. It's not designed to make you happy. And if the happiness is your job, it's always looking for what's wrong. It's always looking for what to fight or what to flight. And I think that once we understand this, then we can start to rewire ourselves neurologically. That's what I really show people how to do is, most people, if you do it enough, you get angry enough, you're wired to be angry. You get angry over little shit, or you get worried all the time. But you can also wire yourself for passion or for love or for certainty or for action. And I think that most of us just have not taken control of that. And here's the problem. The majority of people that are out there, would you say that they are physically fit, strong, and healthy? Yes or no? And the majority of people out there in a passionate relationship with love and passion where they can't wait to be home with the person they're with, yes or no? Not the majority. Are the majority of people out there financially secure? No. Are the majority of people out there loving their work? No. So that's the fucked up society we live in, okay? Okay? But I don't let that get me down, because the fact, I'm not overly optimistic, the fact that very few people do, there's a few that do. There's a few people that are fit. There's a few people that feel connected to God regularly. There's a few people that love and have passion in their way. There's a few people that have all the things we're talking about. And I'm interested in the few who do versus the many who talk. And once I figure out what they do, I just share that with other people and show them how to make it real. But we all believe whatever we live in. Beliefs create and beliefs destroy. So whatever you believe, it's having an impact. The problem is most of us aren't even aware of our beliefs. We're aware of the obvious ones. We're not aware of the subtle ones that affect the way you think and feel every moment of your life. And so what Date with Destiny is really about is uncovering what are the beliefs and values that control every decision, every moment you're alive, every feeling, every thought. The fact that you're here is controlled by your beliefs and values. There are many other things you could do, but something brought you here. It's a set of beliefs and values. What you're wearing is your beliefs and values. Where you're sitting in this room is beliefs and values, right? It doesn't matter what it is. So most of us didn't pick our beliefs and values consciously. And what Date with Destiny is the chance to do that and understand the consequences of it. And then, yes, if you're happier, now you're going to touch other people as well. But to me, it isn't just about me or you. It's about living an extraordinary quality of life where you live in such a beautiful state of being that you don't have to be told what to do. You do what's right automatically. And that's bringing back the human in humanity as far as I'm concerned. And that's my mission.
How you doing, Tony?
Hi.
If you remember, we danced last year in July in
We
Chicago.
danced?
We danced.
Where did we
With me.
dance?
I mean it exactly, we danced. You put me on stage, and I was a fear.
Oh,
I was
yes,
here.
yes, I recognize you now. Oh, yes, I know what you're talking about now.
And since then, actually, my son...
Don't be spreading that word that we were dancing and shit, okay?
Yes, everybody knows.
You're going to
already,
change my
so-
brand. Open up a whole new market.
And I want to actually say thank you to everybody. I never heard about Film Society talks, and I really appreciate you arranged that event, and I really appreciate Joe. You did that movie, which I saw it a couple of weeks ago on YouTube presentation.
You did? You saw it on YouTube?
Yeah. I saw it. Not that. Just you were talking about. You were talking about
Oh, talking about the film.
movie.
Oh,
and,
cool.
Yes.
Netflix would be
and-
quite disappointed if this was on YouTube.
And then I was
Millions of dollars, and it's on YouTube.
I was shocked to see Tony will be here in New York 2 days ago on Facebook. So and I was introduced to your work by my son, who is 31, and he pushed me because I'm Russian, and I'm
Really?
from completely different environment, and I never had any thoughts what I have right now, and I'm a real sample of transformational work done by Tony Robbins, and I don't think anybody does what I do because I'm from like old school, military school, and what you saying, emerge. If you want to do something, you have to emerge, you have to dig in.
Yeah.
Since Chicago, no, it's before Chicago actually. When I start buying all your CDs and everything, incantation,
Yes.
every morning, I do hour and a half with
Wow.
all your incantation words.
Are you serious?
Every day and every way I'm getting better and better. Every day and every way I'm getting smarter and smarter.
That's awesome.
And I want a big company. And let's put this, everybody, since I start listening, in the morning, sit down with me and listen to Tony Robbins. And people start, and I'm in sales, and I bought that 10 days CD sale,
Yes.
which I found absolutely phenomenal. It's like amazing. Like most of your just things you do, CD, videos, and actually 25 years I've been in the United States, and I'm educated, and I was in the army in Russia, and I'm actually was always in shape, always training, and I keep training, and but since I came from Chicago, I did usually my push-ups day routine was 200-300 push-ups a day. In 2 months, I did 2,020. That was
Oh my
my
God,
record.
that's incredible. That's awesome.
In 1 hour, thanks to you.
Wow.
Just push myself.
Yeah, that's great.
Just listening to you, just doing what I'm doing, 2020 in 2 months.
That's incredible.
And that was just absolutely showing to me the way how the person can push himself to any way he wants and achieve anything you want in your life.
Yes.
And very important, I want to say thank you to you to introduce to me attitude of gratitude. Never thought about that, never heard about that, doing that daily basis. My
Yes.
life completely different. Everybody who knows me, I'm like, in my work, everybody fears me. I came very small, very intimidating. Everybody was, now everybody's saying you're a completely different person. Like,
Wow.
you cannot even, mental diet, I never say F word. I never said without anything without F word. Every second word was F word. Now with the
A brother.
everything, I mean, I'm real sample of everything works.
Wow, that's beautiful.
And thank you very much. Thank you. Every day I'm saying, Tony, thank you very much. I treat you like my father, like my dearest friend. Thank you. I just really appreciate this exceptional work. Thank you very much again.
Thank
The
you.
film, Tony Robbins.
I did 2,000 spoon-ups. I want to thank you for that.
I do want to say that, what human beings can do is amazing. What they will do is usually disappointing. And it's not based on capacity. It's just based on training our minds to respond to us. Most people let their mind run them. If your mind runs you, you can make great strategies, but you're not going to have a very happy life. Your mind will never help you enjoy an apple. It'll go, is it organic? Did it come from the right place? Right? Only your heart, your soul, your spirit can enjoy life. And I think we have to learn to put our mind back in the place where it's not the one running the show. It's you're the master of your mind, not let your mind be the master of you. And you're an example of that. You've trained yourself now to get yourself to do whatever you want to do. I've trained myself to do that as well. Once that happens, the world opens up. Because you no longer have excuses, you're no longer looking outside yourself, and you just make it happen. And everybody looks at you and they're mystified, and then they think you're lucky or you're a genius or you're full of shit, whatever they do, because they don't want to look at the fact that if my life is not the way I want it, it's not because it can't be that way, it's not because society's that way, it's because I have tolerated within myself limitations. And we all get what we tolerate. And you can change that as fast as you want, and I hope when you see this film, if you do, that it'll inspire you to think about what's next for you, what's the next level for you, because that's the only thing that makes us happy is that growth, and with that growth we have something to give, and giving is what life's all about.
The film is Tony Robbins, I Am Not Your Guru, available on Netflix in many countries and in theaters in this country. As we give Joe and Tony a round of applause, please stay in your seats so they can get off to their next event that they're heading to. But let's thank them for being with us here at the Film Society today.
And thank you, Eugene. Amazing job.